Welcome back to another episode of Media Talks TV with your host, Tony J. Just want to tap in and see how everybody is doing. Yeah, I know it's been a minute. I have not posted up a video in a while, so forgive me. I've been working, but I want to jump in. Got a couple of videos coming up. First thing I want to talk about is the Diddy trial. I haven't spoken on the Diddy trial because I wanted the whole entire trial to play out. But as far as what's been uh, said at the trial, uh, it's safe to say that I'm a bit skeptical of whether or not Diddy will be found guilty. And I wanted to parlay this into a conversation that I want to have, and it's kind of jumping into the previous video that I set on private. You could go find that video on my Rumble about Tracy Ellis Ross, the double standard. I'm going to continue that later down the line, of course, but you could catch the first part of that conversation over on my Rumble account. But about the Diddy case, a lot has been said in the last month and a half. And next week, we're about to gear up to hear the defense testimony. And there's going to be a lot that's being said, but based off of what we've heard from prosecution and what we've heard in the media, it's safe to say that this case doesn't really measure up to it being a case of racketeering or an a sex trafficking case. Because what's vastly different about this case is, based on the tapes and based on the testimony, this sounds like a case that has to be tried on a state level, not a federal level. That's one. And also, based on the testimony, this looks like a abusive situation that Diddy is, of course, make no mistake about it, he's an abuser. But at the same time, there was not any situation of threat or coercion in the case. And if I was on a jury, I would be asking a lot of questions before I even make a jury decision. And I'm thinking that many of the jurors on that case are going to be making some hard decisions. You know, does it rise to the to RICO is a very complicated thing because it has to have like a web or a network. And that's one thing I understand about RICO. RICO has to have a network of co-conspirators. Right now, I don't really see any co-conspirators. All I see is one man who has a freaky past, a freaky sexual deviancy. But does it rise to the level of RICO? No. And then there are no co-conspirators. This is not an R. Kelly like case. Nothing like an R. Kelly like case. Because what makes it vastly different is, in the R. Kelly case, you had co-conspirators. You had his bodyguards. You had people who were co-conspiring to get women for R. Kelly. There wasn't a situation in this case of Diddy wasn't asking his bodyguards to go get that girl or go get this girl and bring her to my hotel room. There wasn't any case like that, or have them sign non-disclosure agreements, because that's what the R. Kelly case. That's why there was a clear RICO in that case, because he had co-conspirators help him hunt down girls and sexually assault them. He was a predator. And with that being said, this Diddy is not nowhere near where R. Kelly is in this case. And even looking at the evidence that the prosecution has, it's still not enough to really put a RICO on him. Not in this case. And if that was the case, then Cassie would need to go to jail too, because she would technically be a co-conspirator. She even said on the stand that she was a willing participant. So you look at that and you measure, and you had the text messages that was really considered consensual. But what's so dangerous about this case is precedent. And what people don't understand about precedent, it means that when somebody makes a decision legally, then that case gets rendered, they set a new precedent in the court of law to where that case can be used to measure against another case similar to this one to make a rendering and a decision on. And what makes this case very dangerous is it could set a dangerous precedent for people who, you know, have lavish lifestyles. And that's the case that Diddy had a sexual lifestyle that was unorthodox. Well, you could say the exact same thing for Hugh Hefner. Do we think Hugh Hefner sex trafficked women? No. They all wanted to be in the mansion. But when people tell these types of stories, they make people like Hugh Hefner out to be the same thing as a Diddy. So then you're saying that now that I have all these women that attend my parties, it's now considered sex trafficking? You make that make sense. You got white guys like Steve Wynn and people like uh, Hugh Hefner, of all the people, and people like Larry Flint, who've had women that were on their payroll whom he had sex with, whom they went to sex parties and orgies and all this stuff and did drugs. But that wasn't back then. That wasn't considered sex trafficking. That was considered orgies. And it's clear Diddy did something that was, you know, that we expect white people to do, not somebody that's black. So there's a racial bent to the case, whether you believe it or not. It is a racial bent to the case because white men have been doing this shit for years and they weren't federally prosecuted for having a bunch of sex parties, you know. And it's just problematic because we're seeing something that is very odd within the legal system when it comes to victims of sexual assault and women as well. They're trying to make it seem as though it's sex trafficking if they were willing participants, and it's not. And I don't see it based off of the testimony. I don't see it as it was a force or coerced situation. It looks like they were willing participants and they just didn't like it. But not liking it doesn't level to not being a situation of consent, because they could have just walked away from it all, but they were being paid. They had money, so they stayed for the money. But then it goes to the level of women and personal choice. We hear women online talk about how they want men with money, how these OnlyFans models and these people, they all wanted to be with a man with money. And then when they get with a man with money, then all of a sudden their tone changes. And now you're telling the whole entire world that now this is sex trafficking. I mean, listen when to what I'm explaining here, because most of you don't see through the bullshit. You have women at this generation, in this generation, at this age, where they're saying that they don't want to date a man who doesn't make 100K or doesn't make this amount of money. But then when they get the person that they want, or they find a man with a lot of power and a lot of influence, they do whatever they want to be near that man. And they do whatever they want to please that man. And this is just a simple situation that Cassie got herself into. She fell in love with a man with a lot of money. She was young, and unfortunately, the relationship didn't go the way she wanted to and expected it to. So instead, she continued to stay to try and prove to this man that she was in love with him. This was a consensual relationship, and she made that very abundantly clear. It was a relationship that went completely wrong. But a lot of people want to make this out, and especially the media. You got Ashley Banfield on News Nation talking about how this is similar to a RICO case, and interview of mobsters is like comparing apples to oranges and shit. And I'm like, what is she doing comparing this case to a mob like case? Because it isn't nowhere near it. It's a federal case, but it's a federal case it seems like this being overly prejudicial in a sense, and overly manufactured to be something that it is not, because people overreacted when they saw the damn tape. And that's really one of the issues that I have with this case. Some people are going to say, well, Cassie was a victim, and I don't see Cassie as a victim, and neither the women that were in Diddy's circle, because they wanted to be near Diddy because he had power, because they were thirsty for that power. And when you want to go towards somebody that has a lot of money and a lot of influence, you know what you're going to get. They say in society not to meet your heroes. And there's a reason for that. Because sometimes when you meet your heroes, they might be scumbags. And no doubt Diddy is a scumbag, but not to the level of R. Kelly. That's for damn sure. He's a scum in the sense that he's an abuser of women. He takes it, he exploits women, he abuses women. We all agree on that. He's not a good guy. But if this were a case that we were going to convict him on domestic violence and sexual abuse, that would be an open and shut case. He would be guilty. But the federal government isn't trying him on that. And that's what y'all need to remember. He's not being tried for abuse. He's not being tried for sexual violence. He's being tried for a RICO. And if you wanted to put him in jail, try him for the right shit. That's my problem. I'm like, yeah, he's going to walk away from this, but the civil suits aren't going to go away. I'd say, he's going to suffer financially for this. I mean, he's going to be financially devastated from this shit. But as far as him spending the rest of his life in prison, no. Some things that's kind of an overreach and it's kind of draconian to put somebody like him in prison. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve time, but at the same time, does the punishment fit the crime that he's being accused of? And in this case, you're getting two different semantics in the media. You're getting he's a Rico, is a Rico, and he's a mob like figure, and that's what they're painting him as in the media. And then on the other side, also, you're getting he's a drug mule, that he did a whole bunch of drugs. So then, which is it? Which is the image that we're painting of Diddy? Is it one of a drug abuser, an abuser, or a mob like figure that took advantage of a lot of artists and a lot of women? And that's the craziest thing. The media doesn't know how to figure Diddy out. The same way they could figure somebody out like OJ. They can't put him in a box. And that's the funny thing about it. Like, you'll look on some of these channels, and especially my main channel is News Nation, but CBS News can't really place him in a box. Um, News Nation can't really. They're trying to paint him like he's a mob like figure. So Ashley Banfield has this angle that she's using to try and paint Diddy as this mob like figure that abuses women. And it's like, that's not it. These people had relationships, private relationships with this man. I don't see it amounting to anything remotely close to Rico or remotely close to racketeering. Where's the racketeering in this whole thing? Where was the profit motive? Paying people off, that's bribery. That's not coercion. That's bribery. But that doesn't fit under the guise. He didn't use company money. He didn't use the company to try and bribe people. He was using his own money. But you also have to point out too that all the shit that they're talking about in the main piece, that happened in California. That didn't happen in New York. And people need to get that through their thick skull too. Statute of limitations have ran out on that videotape. They couldn't use that even in the prosecution. They couldn't use that. But so many other stuff, even if he got convicted, I see it as him maybe getting out on an appeal. He might get convicted and might spend 10 years, and then it might be a situation where he gets out on appeal. And then by the time he gets out on appeal, uh, they might retry the case again. But do they really want to go through all that criminal litigation? I see it as a civil matter, not a criminal matter. And I think that should be it for him. Like, this is something that he could have settled settled in civil. Federal government trying to get him on a RICO indictment, that shit's not going to work. He might beat this case. And it's time for people to really, if I'm wrong that he didn't beat the case, I will take this video down. I'll delete it and I won't speak nothing of it ever again. But if I'm right, the video will stay up. But I don't see it. I don't see him going. I see him walking. I see him really beating this case because the semantics of it doesn't look right. On its face, it doesn't look right. Because if we're going to, because what it really levels to is not sex trafficking. It's like paying for an escort service. If I paid for an escort service and I had a girl come out and I gave her a plane ticket and she came over for the purpose of sex, that's sex trafficking now? Because really, most rich people do the same shit, fly women out and have sex with them, even though it's consensual. So if I flew a woman out now and she so happened wanted to have sex, now it's considered sex trafficking. See how complicated this shit is? How complicated that is. White people have been doing this shit since the 70s and the 80s. And like I said, people like Larry Flint, Hugh Hefner, you know, they've been doing the same shit for years, but you don't call it sex trafficking to them. Bosses of it, executives that use their executive cars to fly women out and order women on escort service sites for the purpose of companionship. Is that sex trafficking too? And see what's so complicated with the case, and this is why I'm a very big advocate of legalizing prostitution, because it's stupid shit like this that make me wonder, like, you got women out here who are trying to really move the goalpost of what's considered a consensual relationship and what's considered uh coercion. So if somebody slept with their boss to get a promotion, that's quid pro quo. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, isn't that sex trafficking too? Because the whole power imbalance thing. Diddy is a powerful figure. I mean, the man has made almost 980. It's worth $980 million, or close to a billion. But at the same time, there are a lot of people that wanted to be in his circle because of the power and influence they had. You got women that come into men's lives for the simple fact is that they want to upgrade to a better lifestyle. You got women out there that do chase after that. But to be disingenuous and say that Diddy was this person, this evil person that manipulated and taken advantage of women, I think is a bullshit, because at the same time, these women knew what they were getting themselves into. They knew about the influence and the money. So people that are powerful men, I'm not saying I don't have any sympathy for powerful people or rich people at that. But at the same time, we cannot excuse the fact that the people that the women that were around Diddy were around them for a specific reason. They wanted to they wanted to have their lives, their lifestyle upgraded. So they wanted to be close to Diddy. They wanted to be in Diddy's circle, just like Young Miami. They all wanted to upgrade to their lifestyle. But we don't want to talk about that because the truth is, you have women out here now professing they want a man with money. or they want a man with a lot of cars and jewelry and all types of expensive shit. But yet we don't want to talk about, we want them to also be victims too, yet they were gold diggers in the first place because they all wanted to upgrade to their lifestyle and they didn't get what they wanted. So now they're crying wolf. And that's a very big problem with the whole uh, thing about believe all women shit. Like, there has to be two sides to every story, and there has to be a modicum of doubt with women who have testified and made these statements. Some of the shit cannot be true all the time. And you got women who know this and know that they could manipulate the system and move the goalposts any way that they want to get what they want. Now, like I said again, I'm put this disclaimer out there. I am no fan of P. Diddy, but at the same time, Diddy, we have to really acknowledge that women chase men of power. In this case, is not really a simple one. It's complex. But what the main thing to take away from this is not a RICO case. This is a case of abuse. This is a case of sexual deviancy and a sexual over indulgence in a sexual lifestyle and sex and drugs. The same way where we saw Cosby is the same way I see this case. All the shit with the Quaaludes and all this other stuff. But these women wanted to be around Cosby because Cosby had power, and it's the same setup. And now we're trying to level it to it being a sex crime. That's not a sex. Being a gold digger is not a sex crime. You get what you get in the game. It's just like being a drug dealer. Fast money, fast cars, and a bullet. Who are you to blame except yourself for chasing that fast money? And most of these women out here, they all they do is chase fast money. Cassie saw that money and she jumped at it. I don't see anything there as her being a victim. And I know a lot of simp niggas will say, "Oh well, she was a victim. She was coerced. She was naive. She was 19 years old." Well, at 19, you should know better. They don't consider us. They don't consider men dumb when they're 19 years old. They consider men to be okay. You made an adult decision, so you had to have an adult consequence. And I remember when I said that one time, I'm like, okay, if you're a young girl and you mess around with drug dealers, you know what the consequence is for messing around with a drug dealer. Well, what's the consequence to anybody that messes around with a person that has a lot of money? I hear women all the time talk about, he had to have money. He has to have some money. I deserve this. I deserve that. If he can't finance my lifestyle, then I don't want him. Well, you chase after money, you chase after looks. That's the consequence that comes with that game. And a lot of women don't really honestly, they don't honestly understand that. But they want to be treated as if they're teenagers that made bad decisions. You are a grown ass woman making a decision because you wanted your lifestyle to be better. You got tired of working for yourself, so you decided to lay up under a man with money. That's the whole point of this whole scenario. And it's a primary reason why the consequences after everything is said and done, they want more paycheck and more of a money solution to this problem. So if they can't get it in court, they could sue civilly and get settlements out the ass. You know, like I said, I'm not no fan of P. Diddy, but one of the lessons I've taken away from this and acknowledging this is all those girls that were young women that were on that stand. You made an adult choice. You made an adult choice. You were an adult. You weren't a child. You weren't some young little girl. You were a grown ass adult that wanted their lifestyle to change. You wanted some money. And that's the whole point. And even though you still love that person, he's a piece of shit. But you still stayed with him. You went back. And these are type of stories I hate because I'm like, okay, how do you say that this person was bad and you went back? And then the whole default argument is I was afraid of what he might do to me. I was afraid. I was afraid. I hear that shit all the time. They have a default thing that they use. I was afraid that he might follow me. I was afraid that he might hunt me down. So basically you're scared of this guy, but you wasn't scared when he pulled up in his car with all that money and all those minks because you knew he was Diddy. You liked the power. You wanted to be near the power. So it's a choice that you made. Nobody forced you to make that choice. You could have walked away. You could have left it all behind, but you didn't want to because there was money involved and because he was paying for your lifestyle. And this is where I go where I say prostitution in the United States needs to be at this juncture, it needs to be legalized. Cuz look at what women are doing right now. Ever since ever since OnlyFans started, there have been more OnlyFans models and OnlyFans and people, women have been making a lot of money from OnlyFans. But we've also seen online women wanting to be prostitutes online. You see it. All these videos that are coming out, women on Figueroa, women on Aurora Street in Seattle, women on International Boulevard in Oakland, and women on Pomona. You can look up those channels all day. You see nothing but prostitution videos. People driving by filming prostitutes. And what does that say about our society and what it's evolved to? Ever since COVID-19 happened, it seemed like there's been a boom in prostitution and sex work. the massage parlors in Queens, all this stuff, and yet we go back to this whole thing about prohibition and saving young girls and all this other shit, but at the same time, it could be regulated and taxed in out in the open where people are more accepting of it. But this stupid shit of, oh, we're going to, you know, stomp it out of existence and crackdowns and all this other stupid shit. And then you got women like what we see with Diddy, and you have white men of wealth and great means paying for these women to be around, paying for these women, flying them in. That's always been a rich man's sport. One reason why the Bunny Ranch in Nevada exists. But it's time to really face facts about this shit. It's time to face the facts because it shouldn't be a situation where we're constantly talking about these men of great means doing this shit and thinking that, oh, this is now a RICO, this is a violation of the Mann Act and all this other stupid shit. And I'm like, white folks been doing this shit since the 70s and never got locked up for it. But you want to lock up Diddy for the same shit that white folks been doing for the past 50 years? That's a fucking line. And the truth is, everybody done paid for sex. And that's the all out honesty about this whole ordeal. Way I see it, Diddy just had a wild sexual past. That's all I see. But compared to R. Kelly, R. Kelly was just a fucking sexual predator. He hunted women for the thrill of hunting women. He did it for the thrill. This was consensual, and it was just wild parties and orgies. And if that's the case, you're gonna put Diddy in jail for some fucking orgies, then at what point do white folks start going to jail for the same shit? Then think to put Larry Flint in jail for the same shit or Hugh Hefner. You know why? Because in their eyes, it was considered consensual. It was an alternative lifestyle that he was practicing. But a nigga who practices an alternative lifestyle of fucking random women, that's a threat, right? See how you move the goalposts for one person versus the other? And that's essentially what's happening in this case, which goes to show you why they struck one of those jurors out of the juror pool. But that's my rant. This has been another episode of Media Talks TV. Be sure to tune in for the next video I got coming up next. I'm Tony J.